Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is August 30th, 2024, Friday, August 30th, 2024. And first story is out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled Disturbed Places. Mexico City was built on the ruins of the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, and humans have lived there dating back to prehistoric times. If one wonders if there are ghosts in Mexico City, you only need to recognize that tales of skullduggery and murder abound in this ancient city, and the answer should be obvious. It is, alas, chiefly the evil emotions that are able to leave their photographs on surrounding scenes and objects, and whoever heard of a place haunted by a noble deed, or of a beautiful and lovely ghost revisiting the glimpses of the moon? That's a quote from Algernon Blackwood. In other words, stating, haunted places are created out of death, violence, unexpected death, that kind of deal. Anyway, all places have their history, and the passage of time leaves an indelible mark with the signature of the humans which have trod its streets. The older the city, the more life and death have played out, and such is the case of Mexico City. Long before the conquistadors arrived, the Aztecs consecrated the land with the blood of sacrificial victims, culled from virgins within their population, captured warriors, travelers, and children. Wraiths of conquest, revolution, suicide, and natural disasters perhaps exist in a moment where time has not moved forward, and occasionally the living have glimpses of them. The first place we're going to look at is called Posada del Sol, which translates to Inn of the Sun. The Posada del Sol on Avenida de Niños Héroes en Colonia Doctores was a creation of Fernando Saldaña Galvan, an engineer who was at one time in charge of Mexico's newsprint agency and a powerful political figure. Architect Juan Sordo Madaleno designed Galvan's vision, where he hoped to create a meeting place for artists and intellectuals. Building of the hotel started in 1937, and by 1945, when it was inaugurated, it was only half finished, at least by Saldaña Galvan's standards, since he planned other additions to the structure, which has a schizophrenic flavor mixed with genius. It opened with over 500 rooms surrounded by fountain-decorated gardens, spread out through several seven-story buildings. There was a casino, theater, and its own distilling plant for pure water. Each room had an iron grillwork balcony overlooking the patio. The trimmings were of decorative tile, and the furniture was of hand-carved primavera. The windows were of stained glass, and the pillars of marble. In the middle was a small circular chapel, and the fountain of youth in the center of this. Despite being opened only a few years, sometime between 1949 and 1950, it closed. Miguel Alemán Valdez headed a government process that expropriated the property to settle Galvan's debts. It suggested that Saldaña Galvan had redirected public funds to finish the hotel, but the misappropriation of funds did not go unnoticed, which his political opponents took advantage of. Another theory is the use of Masonic symbols designed throughout the building, like the repetition of the number 33, staves, pregnant virgins, and a cryptic alphabet that alludes to esotericism, brought about the closure. It's believed that Galvan was urged by his lodge brothers to incorporate them in the design. Freemasonry has always been linked to Mexican politics, but perhaps he went rogue in performing rites his lodge brothers did not agree with, or perhaps the pressure came from other religious groups, which resulted in the closure of the hotel. Present day, the only part of the building that has not been abandoned is the chapel. On the floor is a five-pointed star that extends over the entire area. Beneath the star and behind the altar is a hidden piping system that could have been used either as illumination or to clean the floor after some type of blood ritual. There are stories that the bones and skull of 40 people were found between the double walls of tunnels in the building. Some believe this is proof of ritual human sacrifices carried out at La Posada del Sol. 12 statues of owls ring the top of the chapel as they watch the room below that is decorated with signs of the zodiac. Outside of the chapel, a grand winding staircase adorned with gargoyles, nicks up through the building. Galvan died on March 19, 1953, 3 years after the hotel was closed down at his home from pneumonia. He was 57 years old. There's another more sordid version in which he committed suicide by hanging himself from a patio at the Posada del Sol in front of a statue of St. Francis de Assisi protected by a wolf. In a variation of this scenario, he killed his entire family, which is more myth than reality since in 1953 his daughter Catalina was 32 years old and his son Luis Fernando was 29 years old. Both of them were already married. Regardless of how he ended his days, Galvan's ghost is said to haunt the hotel, which through the years has deteriorated and present day is leaning under its own weight. In the years following the abandonment of the building, it became by turns a home to the Instituto Indigenista Americano, el Consejo de Recursos Minerales, and the Procuradura General de Justicia. The source of another haunting supposedly started during the 1970s, when the offices of the National Institute for Community Development and Rural Housing, or IDECO, had a nursery there. This is where the workers' children were cared for. A small girl was lost, and eventually her body was found in a hidden cellar that could only be reached by a tunnel. Who killed her and why was never known, but her ghost is said to haunt the tunnels and room 103. Where the truth lies about this aging structure is not really known, but perhaps it is most haunted by the possibilities of what it never became. Now, the next story that we're looking at is true crime, and it involves a murderer that was nicknamed the Tacuba Strangler. Gregorio, or aka El Goyo Cardenas Hernandez, was a spree killer who was given the moniker of the Tacuba Strangler. His victims were 3 prostitutes and a student who he killed between August to September 1942. He was a short, thin man who, like other psychopaths, displayed cruelty to animals as a child. He was still wetting his bed as a teenager and had problems controlling his sphincter. Despite the turmoil of his psyche, he earned a scholarship to study chemistry at the Universidad Autónoma de Mexico, or UNAM. Perhaps it was the culmination of unfulfilled fantasies, but on August 15, 1942, Maria de los Angeles Gonzalez, 16, a young prostitute, was raped and strangled at his home at Mal del Norte in Tacuba. He buried her body in the garden. In the following days, he raped and strangled Rosa Reyes and Raquel Martinez de Leon, both 16 and prostitutes. They joined Maria in the garden. His last victim was Graciela Arias Avalos, 19, a fellow chemistry student who he claimed he loved, so he raped her body after he killed her. It was Graciela's father who contacted police about the disappearance of his daughter. Sensing that perhaps his best defense was insanity, Cardenas checked himself into a local psychiatric hospital, even though there is a version where he was committed by his mother, Vicenta Hernandez, after he started acting crazy. The authorities quickly determined he was faking insanity. Police arrested him on September 7, 1942, after exhuming the bodies in the garden. Cardenas pled guilty to the charges of homicide, clandestine burial, and necrophilia. He said about himself, quote, "The man disappears and the beast comes out. I cannot refrain the tremendous hate I feel against them, and that impulse has taken me to the sad condition in which I am in." End quote. Dr. Gonzalo Lafora, who studied Cardenas, described that he always showed pathological signs that were most likely inherited from his father and grandfather, which contradicts a story that his behavior was a product of a childhood bout of encephalitis. Lafora described where Cardenas was obsessed with prostitutes and contracted several venereal diseases as a teenager. In 1940, he met Virginia Leal, who became his lover. However, a short while later, she left him. He was then forced to marry Sabina Lara Gonzalez, after her parents reported him to the courts for raping her. The marriage was short-lived since Sabina started to have extramarital affairs and left him. She also let out the secret of his incontinence. El Goyo, as he was known, also had an extremely dysfunctional relationship with his mother, who was aggressive and reprimanded him even as an adult. He was sentenced to life and was sent to La Castañeda Psychiatric Hospital. Authorities were to learn that he was as much a manipulator as a killer. Cardenas made friends with the hospital personnel and was allowed to open a store where he sold sodas and cigarettes to inmates and employees. In a case of misplaced trust, he was allowed to go to Mixoac to pick up supplies. In December 1946, he escaped with a nurse to Oaxaca. He was apprehended, but this time he was sent to serve his sentence at the notorious Lecumberri prison. Dr. Quiroz Cuaron reported that once at Lecumberri, El Goyo displayed feminine mannerisms, and he found several photographs of him dressed as a woman. Goyo was finally diagnosed while in prison with paranoid schizophrenia. While behind bars, he studied psychiatry and law. He also married and had 4 children. In 1976, President Luis Echevarria pardoned him after his lawyer argued that at 62 years old, he lacked sexual and criminal appetite. Afterward, he was invited by Interior Secretary Mario Moya Palencia to give a speech in the Congress of the Union where he was celebrated as a hero. In the years following his arrest, there were reports of several copycat murderers, and a pornographic movie based on his story was made. Ironically, once he was a free man, he practiced law after he received a law degree in 1985. He died in 1999 in Los Angeles. Alejandro Jodorowsky, the eccentric Chilean filmmaker, made a film about him titled Santa Sangre. The murder house in Tacuba still stands, haunted if not by the murderer, then by his victims who were cheated of justice since their killer went on to live a full life and experience all they never did. I'm sorry, I don't get this part about him being celebrated by Congress. I mean, how's this? I can see where, because I've seen it, where certain criminals, especially as they get older, they get paroled, sometimes either because they're old or if their health is going bad, they're put on parole. In other words, they're set free and technically they're still on parole and they have to check in, and it's like, but none of these people are taken, are like the president shows them, celebrates them, and the Congress. That's the part I don't get. What's this man, whatever, he sounded like he was a psychopath and he killed 4 women. And he was a necrophiliac. What was there to celebrate? That part, don't get it. I don't get it. Believe me, I believe in rehabilitation if it's possible. Sometimes rehabilitation, I'm sorry to say, and I know that there's people, rehabilitation, especially in many, many criminals, is not. In other words, the only rehabilitation they're going to do is like what they say, that you're so old, you're not going to. And even then, not too long ago, like maybe a couple of years ago, there was a serial killer who was released on parole, and he was 82, 83. Guess what he did? Within a few months, he killed somebody else. So there you go. You're never too old. Anyway, still staying on Stranger Than Fiction stories, the next story is called The Treasure of Tomares. The treasure is made up of a large stash of 4th century Roman coins discovered under the portico of a villa in the province of Seville, Spain. In April of 2016, a civil guard patrol arrived at a construction site at El Saudan Park in Tomares. Heavy machinery came across 19 ceramic vessels filled with what appeared to be coins. They were hidden in a sealed area, covered with a few bricks and ceramic filler. The excavator bucket broke some of the jars, however, 9 remained untouched and sealed. In 2022, 6 years since the discovery, archaeologists from the University of Seville have released a report about what was found on that spring day. Coin experts examined almost 6,000 pieces and found there was a total of 53,000 coins kept in the 19 amphorae. The hiding area was under an outbuilding of a Roman villa that has yet to be discovered. The estimated amount of coins was arrived at after examination of the contents, and it was found that there were 2,800 coins in each vessel. The coins were produced between the years 294 and 311 AD, during the reign of the emperors Diocletian, Maximian, Constantius, Galerius, Constantine, Severus, Maximinus, Licentius, Maxentius. None of the coins go beyond the year 312. They came from the mints of Rome, Carthage, Aquileia, Treveris, Ticinium, Lugdunum, Londinium, Scythia, and Ostia. A smaller number of coins came from Alexandria, Xiscus, Thessaloniki, Herculaea, Nicomedia, and Antioch. The majority have Emperor Diocletian on them and were produced in Carthage. This could be due to the fact that Diocletian's coins had more silver in it. After much debate, the stash was valued at $395,000 or £320,000, which equates to $550,000 today, and they were bought by the Museum of Somerset. The reason for the hoarding of the coins is theorized to be due to political uncertainty and social clashes of the time. For important financial transactions, a huge number of money was necessary. Inflation was eating Rome's wealth, which was addressed by producing more money of poor quality. The location of the villa is on a plateau in El Aljarafe that overlooks the Guadalquivir countryside. This place has been inhabited since the Paleolithic or Copper Age. Through hundreds of years, different cultures have left their mark as seen in single-chamber megalithic tombs at a Phoenician sanctuary known as El Camabolo and the Roman city of Hispalis. A survey carried out on the grounds of where the coins were discovered found the remains of a building dating to between the 3rd and 4th centuries. The wall and buttresses were excavated and had elements of horreos or granaries. The building had a portico supported by columns and paved with lime. The construction dates to the 1st century, and it was used until the 4th century, which is when the coins were stashed under the warehouse entrance. 200 years later, the materials from the horreos were repurposed. However, the treasure remained hidden. It's believed the granary belonged to a villa which usually had adjacent buildings to store food, animals, and living quarters for workers. One has to wonder what happened to the person who hid this treasure. Did he forget? Or most probably die unexpectedly before he disclosed his secret. The ancient Romans definitely had a habit of hiding their most prized possessions. To date, 17,945 coin hoards have been unearthed in Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia, along with myriad other treasure troves, and chances are many are still out there waiting to be discovered. The Romans conquered the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and Portugal, referred to as Hispania, in 264 BC. It was divided into two provinces, Hispania Ulterior, which is present-day Andalusia, Extremadura, southern Leon, and most of Portugal, and Hispania Citerior, or Tarraconensis, which is northern, eastern, and south-central Spain. The name Hispania is derived from the ancient Celtic tribe of the Iberians who lived in the area prior to the Romans. It was reported in August 2024 that sites first identified in the 1980s and 1990s were revisited in 2023 with researchers from the University of Cádiz. Contrary to their initial expectations, they found 57 interconnected sites that were scattered across the regions of Arcos de las Fronteras, Bornos, Villamartín, and Puerto Serrano, which had routes along the Guadalete River. It's now believed all these settlements and their strategic locations suggest a hidden empire existed during the Roman occupation. The team was using ground-penetrating radar to find buildings beneath the surface. A Roman villa at a Cañuelo in Bornos with residential and workplace areas was discovered with this technology. In September 2021, two amateur freedivers found a large collection of Roman coins off the east coast of Spain. They found 8 coins in pristine condition off the island of Potixol in Xabia. Further dives by archaeologists recovered 45 coins. The perfectly preserved coins were dated to between the end of the 4th century to 5th century AD. The inscriptions were legible and are from the reign of Valentinian I, Valentinian II, Theodosius I, Arcadius, Donrius, and one unidentified one. It's believed the coins were hidden by a wealthy landowner who wanted to protect his money from the Alans, Suevi, and Vandals, barbarians who were looting the Western Roman Empire. Perhaps like the discovery in Tomares, the owner died before being able to collect their coins. Which, this is how it happens. People stashed the loot, their money, whether it was because of inflation. And like they said, the one in Tomares, the majority of the coins that were there were the most that had the most silver. Or in this case, because you've got barbarians raiding, so what's the safest thing? You bury it. And then the person, of course, you know what they say about secrets, the person with the secret knowledge of where this thing is hidden dies. Gets killed, you know, has a heart attack, and that's it. Nobody else knows. Nobody goes now. Because this was considerable money, and there you go. All of a sudden, the next thing you know, it gets discovered hundreds of years later. All right, next story is out of Forbes, and this is titled Scientists Claim to Solve MH370 Mystery, but Experts Urges Caution. A decade ago, a Malaysian Airlines flight disappeared without a trace, becoming one of aviation history's greatest mysteries. An Australian researcher now says he knows why MH370 went missing, maintaining that his conclusions changed the narrative of the ill-fated aircraft carrying 227 passengers and 12 crew members. Rather than MH370 being a no-blame story of high-speed, fuel-starved dive, Vincent Lin says his research demonstrates the actions of a mastermind pilot almost executing an incredible perfect disappearance in the southern Indian Ocean. The adjunct researcher at the University of Tasmania's Institute for Marine and Arctic Studies wrote in a LinkedIn post that he confidently titled Mystery of MH370 Solved by Science. A perfect disappearance, Lin says, because the pilot, 53-year-old Zahari Ahmad Shah, deliberately crashed the Boeing 777 into a 20,000-foot seafloor hole surrounded by high ridges and other deep holes that he knew would make it an ideal hiding place. Past theories have suggested that Shah deliberately crashed the plane in a premeditated murder-suicide plot. If true, why? We'll probably never know, but a BBC documentary on MH370 mentions studies reporting high rates of mental health issues among pilots, including suicidal thoughts. In his LinkedIn post earlier this month, Lin said that after 2 years under review, his findings have been accepted for publication in the Journal of Navigation, which has previously shared other analysis related to the flight scheduled to travel from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on March 8, 2014, when it vanished from all radar. The mystery has led aviation experts, engineers, journalists, and grieving family members to formulate exhaustive theories, including one that cyber terrorists hijacked the plane remotely, but aerial satellite, surface, and underwater search efforts have yet to provide conclusive answers. That Lin's assertions are already generating multiple headlines and sparking online chatter on Reddit and beyond speaks to the enduring intrigue surrounding MH370's disappearance. The fascination with lost plane mysteries is very much a part of the culture of aviation, much like lost ship mysteries are part of the culture of seafaring, said Janet Bednarik, a professor at Ohio's University of Dayton who teaches urban and aviation history. And you know what? I haven't followed the story close enough because obviously 2014, this is a 10-year space of time. But you know what? This sounds plausible that if you have a pilot, that was intent on this, that he plotted it out that far in ahead. And also think about it. If it's always left in limbo as to that it was not just a crash, maybe mechanical failure or something else, that it was indeed a pilot that decided to kill everybody along with himself, think about it. Think about the lawsuits that would be involved against the airlines, possibly, if that was ever demonstrated, if that was ever proven somewhere, that they would say, okay, because I believe, I don't know exactly what the requirements are, but I'm almost positive that pilots, and I don't know if the airlines that he worked for required this, but I know that every once in a while, they do psychological evaluations on them. Or even if a coworker or another pilot says, "Hey, something's wrong with this person," was there anything in his personnel record that would have raised a flag, and that then the airlines could be held liable for, like, how did you allow this pilot to keep working if there was all these problems or all these flags that were raised, either by coworkers or just by observing his behavior. So I can see where I can see where the airlines, to avoid that, would just rather leave this in limbo. We'll never know. Short of finding the 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 actual ship, and I know that they have made extensive. A lot of people have tried to find this plane, and nothing's ever been found. And this theory that this gentleman proposes sounds very, very plausible, unfortunately. So yeah, too bad we even have to worry about who's piloting the planes, especially who's piloting the planes. I mean, come on. All right, going back to stranger than fiction stories. The next story is titled Mining Town Massacre. One day in 1885, a man named Martin Nelson slaughtered 7 innocent people in the town of Bonito, New Mexico. As the years passed, it became a ghost town destined to be flooded, and it exists only in the depths of Bonito Lake. Like many mining towns of the Southwest, it has its share of ghost stories. California's gold rush in the mid-19th century spurred mining fever all over the Southwest. Whenever a hint was made known that someone had made a strike, boom towns would spring up overnight. In the 1880s, the Rio Bonito Silver Mining Company was operating mines in the area near Fort Stanton. The little town took its name from the mine, and Bonito City, which started with tents, soon graduated to a general store, post office, and a boarding house known as the Mayberry Hotel. In 1884, a butcher shop and saloon were opened. J. Geo Huber was putting in an addition to a store to house the post office, since the saloon would be taking over the post office building. Milt Carrier and Martin Nelson, which was to figure so prominently in A Horrible Crime a year later, were doing contract work for Herman Beck, whose days were also counted. These mining towns lured a cross-section of people, from the opportunistic to the merchant to the criminal, and it was thought impolite in those times to ask too much about a person's background. Perhaps it would have spared lives if Martin Nelson would have been asked more about his history. All that was known was that he was a miner from Nebraska and had been living in the area for the past 4 years. Described as a sane citizen, he had been elected constable in the fall of 1884. Nelson lived at the boarding house owned by the Mayberry family. He shared a room with another boarder, Dr. William Flynn, who had come to New Mexico from Boston for his health. Earlier that night, the family and their guest played cards until 10 p.m. What prompted Martin Nelson to steal a fob watch from Dr. Flynn remains a mystery that Nelson took to the grave with him. The sound of scuffling in the room the men shared awoke the family, and they immediately came to find out what was happening. When William Mayberry burst through the door, Martin Nelson shot him dead with a .38 caliber rifle, and then his 16-year-old son John. Dr. Flynn had already been dispatched when Nelson fractured his skull with the butt of his gun and then shot him in the chest. Eddie Mayberry, who was 5 years old, was clubbed on the head and then shot in the head by Nelson in his bed as he screamed in horror. Amanda Mayberry, his mother, was shot twice, but not fatally, and she grabbed her daughter Nellie and tried to flee. Nelson caught them as they made it out the front door and shot once more, ending Mrs. Mayberry's life. He spared Nellie when she pleaded for her life, even though she was wounded in her side. Nellie Mayberry, who survived the ordeal, later stated that her father, mother, and brothers all begged Nelson not to kill Dr. Flynn. Mrs. Mayberry was shot twice but regained consciousness and tried to slip past Nelson and get downstairs, taking Nellie with her. She got as far as the dooryard when Nelson shot her a third time. The bullet wounded Nellie and hit her mother in the heart. Realizing her mother was dead, she ran to the cellar of a nearby house. Nelson followed and pulled his gun on her, saying, "I might as well send you to hell with the balance of them." But she pleaded so hard that he spared her on the condition she promised to come and see him hung. That was an excerpt from a local newspaper. The sound of shots rang out through the pre-dawn silence, and Pete Nelson, a saloon owner, came running. He was shot dead when he arrived at the Mayberry house. D.C. Taylor, the local justice, stood with the townspeople who had gathered around the boarding house when the shots rang out. They believed Nelson was still inside the house, but he had fled to Mrs. Rodemaker's, which was a short distance away. Her husband was with the crowd in front of the boarding house. He told the woman what he had done and ordered something to eat, which she fearfully prepared for him. He gave her $1 and said there were other sons of bitches that he was going to kill, and perhaps he himself would be killed. Suddenly the townspeople heard a shot from the rear of the Mayberry house, where Herman Beck, the grocer, had been guarding. They found Beck was dead after being shot in the back. They saw Nelson reloading his Winchester and yelling out, "Take to the brush, you sons of bitches." Taylor gave the order to fire, and Nelson was struck in the breast and in the side. Inside his pocket was Dr. Flynn's watch. The only survivor of the massacre, Nellie Mayberry, moved to Iowa to live with her maternal grandmother and 2 uncles. She went on to marry, had children, and died in 1950 at the age of 75. Prior to the murders, there had been a string of unsolved robberies in the area, including a previous one at the Mayberry house, which were now attributed to Nelson. The Mayberry family and the other citizens were laid to rest inside the perimeter of the small cemetery perched on a hill overlooking the town. Dr. Flynn's body was shipped to his family in Boston. Examination of his body showed where he had been savagely beaten about the head with a pistol butt before being shot in the chest. The town might have been cheated of hanging Nelson, so they exiled him in death. A plain wooden coffin was hastily put together for him, and he was buried outside the cemetery in unconsecrated ground at the bottom of a hill. By the end of June 1885, less than a month after the murders, there was a public sale ordered by the probate court to sell the Mayberry property, which was described as a house, lot, and household furniture, 3 mules, and 1 wagon. Peter Nelson's bar, along with his buggy, and Martin Nelson's house, lot, 2 horses, 1 saddle, 1 revolver, and 2 Winchester rifles were part of the sale. At about the same time, a rumor started to circulate that 2 brothers of Martin Nelson were planning to come to Bonito City and find out why Martin was shot down in the street. In response, the local newspaper published, quote, "Wouldn't it be a good idea for the citizens of Bonito, when they learn they are coming to meet them outside the town, and give them a hearty welcome? That's about what they'll get if they come in with a grand hurrah," end quote. In other words, yeah, come on down, we got something for you. Despite the horrible crime, Bonito City continued as a trading post for miners, some who worked in the famous Parsons gold mine in Tan Bark Canyon, which operated from 1887 to 1933. In 1902, the Eagle Mining and Development Company purchased all the mining claims along the Rio Bonito, which comprised about 6,000 acres of mineral lands. Plans were made to build a dam for a 500 horsepower plant. It would be used to draw power for a big cyanide plant and crusher to grind up ore for treatment. By 1908, business in Bonito City had slowed down so much that J.M. McNeil had plans to relocate his saloon to San Angelo, Texas. Then the post office closed in 1911, and by 1920 all that remained was a store and 8 houses. The years passed, and eventually the mine closed. With it went the remaining inhabitants, and soon Bonito City had become a ghost town. In the late 1920s, the Southern Pacific Railroad dammed the Bonito Creek to create a reservoir that would fuel its steam engines. In 1933, the tombs in the graveyard were disinterred and moved to Angus Cemetery in Alto, New Mexico. The Southern Pacific Railroad bought the water rights, and a dam was built, which would result in the flooding of the entire area. It was rumored that Nelson's body, when exhumed, was face down in the coffin, with his body pointing west. He was wearing the same bullet-riddled clothes he had died in. Present day, the few structures of the one-time mining town are under 75 feet of water below Bonito Canyon Dam and what is known as Bonito Lake. In the 1950s, the railroad sold the lake to the city of Alamogordo, which needed a reliable water supply to provide the town's drinking water. Eerie sounds and lights have been reported around Bonito Lake, rife with abandoned mines and an entire ghost town beneath the lake. The haunting is sometimes attributed to Nelson Martin and his victims, but no doubt many unsavory things happened that were never documented in the newspapers. Such is the nature of frontier mining towns. So perhaps the ghost of Martin keeps company with others who came seeking gold, but found death instead. As of June 2024, the lake remains closed due to the Blue 2 fire. There had been damage from the 2012 Little Bear fire. So there you go. Now, what happened? How this guy... well, even he had been around for 4 years and he had just been elected a few months before as constable. Apparently, this guy had been robbing people. And I don't know, it's almost like, I want to say a compulsion that he actually tried to rob a man that he was in the same room with. Like, in other words, there was not going to be any doubt that he was the thief. And obviously, he was a murderer. So it goes to show that who knows what else this guy did. You just don't wake up one day and decide you're going to become a thief and a murderer. Like that, a cold-blooded murderer. So, there you go. Eerie news with eerie people. Yeah, they've always been around. I'll be back soon with some more strange stuff. Till then.